Okay, welcome everyone. I'm Tim Gillard in the CBC Counseling office, and we're joined today by one of our great partners in St. Louis. The St. Louis University is always very helpful to what we're trying to do here at CBC, and of course we send a lot of students their way. And today we're joined by Hannah Smith from Student Financial Services over at St. Louis University, and we really appreciate you being here, Hannah. Hannah's going to walk us through sort of a financial aid 101 and things that juniors and or seniors should be thinking about on the financial processes when it comes to college admissions and the whole college process. So Hannah, thanks so much for being here, and I'll be listening along with our families.
Sounds good. Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm going to share my screen.
Okay.
Just make sure you can see the presentation screen, right?
I can, yes.
Okay, perfect. So, we'll just kind of jump right into Financial Aid 101. As Mr. Gillard said, it's going to be a combination of kind of information that both juniors and seniors can kind of take and digest at this point in the process, and hopefully kind of anticipate some of those questions that you have about the financial aid process right now, wherever you are in your journey. So we'll talk about the types of financial aid and how to apply for those different types of aid and at what point those applications become available to you. We'll go over that free application for federal student aid. So we'll talk about the FAFSA, what it means, some kind of helpful tips and tricks as you're filling it out, and how that gets sent to the colleges and universities that you're looking at that are on your list. We'll also kind of go over the financial aid offer process. That's what schools will send to you to kind of show you all of the aid that you're eligible for at their institution. So we'll kind of talk through that process, talk through some questions and things that you should have on your mind when you get those from universities, and then how to kind of digest that information and move forward in your college search. And then we'll talk through just general timeline. A lot of the things related to the financial aid process happen in your senior year. And so we'll kind of talk about that senior year timeline, what happens when, so you can kind of anticipate those things as they come. So types of financial aid, really all things that can be considered financial aid kind of boil down into two big overarching groups. We have gift aid. That's essentially free money that's awarded in the form of scholarships or grants that are given to students, sometimes based on academic achievements, extracurricular achievements, their talent-based scholarships, their athletic aid, and then need-based aid also falls within this bucket as well. Need-based aid typically comes in the form of grants that don't have to be paid back. And so that's considered that gift aid or that free money that students can use towards their cost of education at those institutions that they're interested in. There's also self-help aid that is made up of money that you do have to pay back, or money that you have to kind of do a little bit more to be able to earn as you go. So this money is loans in the form of student loans or parent loans, and also money in the form of work opportunities like federal work study. Those work opportunities work a little bit differently than other types of financial aid. You have to go out and find a job on the campus that you're attending to be able to earn those funds throughout the course of the year, but can be used towards your cost of attendance. So can be put towards tuition or fees or your room and board if you're living on campus, or they can be used as just kind of discretionary funds. So things like books and supplies, personal expenses, finding food outside of the cafeteria, that sort of thing, your federal work study money can go towards. So of course, when we're talking about these types of financial aid, really what we're trying to go after with the most gusto is these scholarships and grants, because that's money that you don't have to pay back, and just going to kind of discount your cost of attendance at these different institutions that you're looking for. So first and foremost, when we're applying for admission to these different institutions, a lot of times schools will kind of wrap their merit scholarship application up in their application for admission. So you just fill out that one application and you're automatically considered for admission and scholarship at that institution. That's a big question that you'll want to ask as you're getting in the thick of applying for schools is, are there separate applications for merit scholarships and admission? Is there anything additional that I need to submit to put my name in the hat for those merit scholarships? This is typically where you're going to find kind of the most amount of aid that's offered to you by an institution is going to be kind of in this merit scholarship bucket. These can be based on a combination of GPA and standardized test scores. A lot of schools have kind of moved to be test optional after the pandemic, but schools are the pendulum is swinging back a little bit in terms of maybe they're test optional for admission, but not for scholarships. And so that's another question to kind of have on your mind when you're thinking about applying to these different institutions, making sure that you're maximizing your aid eligibility is just asking, do you require test scores for both admission and scholarships? Are you test optional for both? So that you know that going in and can be prepared with all of the information that that institution needs to be able to make decisions about both admission and your aid eligibility there. When we're talking about need-based aid, usually in the form of grants, really the application that you need to fill out is the free application for federal student aid. Most schools aren't going to require you to fill out the FAFSA, but it's going to be required if you are wanting to be eligible for that need-based aid. And that need-based aid can come from federal sources. So you could be eligible for a federal Pell Grant or a supplemental educational opportunity grant from the federal government. You could be eligible for state aid. So if you're staying within the state of Missouri, you could be eligible for Bright Flight or Missouri Access by filling out the free application for federal student aid. You could also put your name in the hat for eligibility for institutional aid. So there's lots of different sources for this need-based aid that can kind of come together to create that financial aid offer at each institution that you're looking at. The CSS profile is another kind of need-based aid application that schools might be asking for. A lot of times more selective institutions that are guaranteeing to meet a certain percentage of your demonstrated need will ask for the CSS profile. As a general rule, we say never pay for free aid, but this is an exception to that rule. The CSS profile does involve a little bit of a fee to be able to file, but usually there's a lot of money that's going to be offered kind of on the back end if you are eligible to have some aid based on your demonstrated need at those institutions. So to fill out that FAFSA form, everything has kind of been consolidated into one website out on studentaid.gov. And so here is where you can file the FAFSA. You can learn more about the grants offered from the federal government. You can learn more about the federal loan options that are available to you. This is also where you'll kind of complete your aid process as well. If you're interested in taking out any of those federal student loans or applying for a Parent Plus loan, you're going to be going to this one website. So studentaid.gov houses kind of all of that information related to federal student aid. So it's pretty easy. It takes about 30 minutes to complete that free application for federal student aid. And it can be found by just Googling, FAFSA or student aid application, things like that. Just make sure that it's .gov. And not a .com or .org. And the first F in FAFSA stands for free. So never pay to file the FAFSA. No one should be asking for credit card information or payment information of any kind. It's free to file out there on studentaid.gov. So for juniors, you're going to be filling out the 24-25 FAFSA. So you're going to be looking at going into school for the 24-25 aid year. And that FAFSA is going to open this October 1st of 2023. So that's when you're going to be able to file that FAFSA and, or I'm sorry, seniors, seniors this year, you're going to be filing that to start.
Yeah, well, current juniors would in October of 23 the FAFSA would open for them and they would submit it while they're seniors.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, this would be completed in your senior year of high school. Most need-based aid is awarded on a first come, first served basis. So as soon as you can submit that application as close to October 1st. Now, if you submit it on October 2nd or even like November 1st, you're still going to be eligible for that need-based aid. You'll just want to make sure that you are up to date on kind of priority deadlines at the different institutions that you're looking at applying to. Some priority deadlines can be as early as December 1st, but a pretty typical priority deadline for filing the FAFSA would be February 1st or April 1st. So you have quite a bit of time to get that in after that FAFSA opens on October 1st.
Okay, but still, like just like college applications, if it's ready to go and you can complete it earlier the better. And that's consistent with our messaging about applications, August, September, October, with the earliest priority deadlines for applications being October 15th and then a whole bunch on November 1st. Earlier the better, so things you can do to prepare for this are really helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. And then you'll complete that free application for federal student aid each year that your student is enrolled in college. So for current seniors, you're also going to be filling out that 24-25 FAFSA for your sophomore year of college if you're wanting to retain any federal, state, or institutional need-based aid. And different institutions have kind of different regulations about this. At SLU, you're not required to continue to file the FAFSA if you have institutional need-based aid. It just automatically rolls from year to year, even if there's not a FAFSA on file. But if you are interested in taking out those federal student loans, if you are interested in a Parent Plus loan through the federal government, or if you have that federal need-based aid or state aid, you're going to want to file that FAFSA every year that you're enrolled in college. So hints. So the FAFSA is always based on prior tax information. So for juniors who are going to be filling out that 24-25 FAFSA in the fall, it's going to ask you for 22 tax and income information. So hopefully you will have filed your 22 taxes by that point to have that information to just kind of put on that FAFSA form. If you have or planning on filing for a tax extension, you'll want to likely wait to file that FAFSA until you have that tax information. You can go ahead and file that FAFSA without tax information and just say, will file, and then go in and submit a correction later on if you're wanting to do that. But typically it's best to just have that information at your ready when you are sitting down to file that FAFSA for the first time. To be able to file that free application for federal student aid, both the student and one parent that's going to be listed on the FAFSA needs to create an FSA ID. And this is just a login basically for federal student aid. It can be an email, a mobile number as your username, and then password. And this FSA ID is going to serve as your login and essentially your electronic signature for the FAFSA form. So both the student and one parent that's listed on the FAFSA will have to have that FSA ID to be able to sign the FAFSA at the very end and formally submit.
Hannah, is that something they can do before October 1st?
Yes, absolutely. I was just going to say, you can go ahead and establish this FSA ID for the student and for the parent. If you are a family who has had multiple children already go through this FAFSA process, and you already have an FSA ID, that parent FSA ID is going to be the same for all of your children, but the student ones will be distinct based on, that student's information. So you can reuse your FSA ID. It's tied to your social security number, so it's yours for life. And if you don't remember that FSA ID information, there is a way to go back and recover that information and reset your password and things like that. I would highly recommend students go out and make their own FSA IDs separate from the parents. It gets a little confusing if parents are trying to establish the FSA ID for both their student and themselves. Inevitably, some wires get crossed and some information gets on, one account versus the other. So it's typically best for whoever's information is, tied to that FSA ID. They're the ones that go out and establish that ID for themselves. It's also going to require kind of multi-factor authentication for both a mobile number and an email. So make sure that you have access to that mobile number and that email when you're trying to establish that FSA ID out there. And keep that info in a safe place because you'll want that for when you're ready to file the FAFSA come October. There are going to be some simplifications and changes to the FAFSA application in the 24-25 year. The application will largely look pretty much the same, but if you filed the FAFSA before, you might remember that there's something called the IRS data retrieval tool that allowed you to go out to the IRS and port in your tax information from your tax return for that year that they were asking. That tool is transitioning to the direct data exchange, but it essentially does the exact same thing. So it allows you to go out to the IRS and port in that tax and income information from that year that they're asking for. So that's highly recommended if you are eligible for that, to be able to use that direct data exchange. That just allows us to see, okay, that information was ported over and is accurate as of the time that they filed the FAFSA. There are also help tools throughout the form. So there's a question mark that has hover help on each question. So if you're ever wondering what are they asking about or where do I find this information, you can always click on that question mark and get more information about where to go to find that specific information that they're asking for. And then ahead of the FAFSA opening in October, there are FAFSA practice tools. There's also a paper FAFSA. So you can go out there and go to studentaid.gov and look up the FAFSA practice tools, or look up that paper FAFSA to be able to see all of the questions that they're going to ask you, so you can kind of be prepared and come with that information. There's also a FAFSA worksheet that allows you to kind of see all of that information that they're going to ask you and kind of jot down that information ahead of that FAFSA opening. So that can be really helpful if you're coming to a FAFSA night at a school or something like that. You can fill out all of that information prior to, and then come and just put it in the computer as that worksheet says. So your FAFSA is going to spit out something prior known as the expected family contribution. In 24-25, that is transitioning to student aid index, but it's essentially the same. That number is going to tell you your aid eligibility for federal, state, and institutional sources. And then those schools that are listed on your FAFSA, you can have up to 10. We'll be able to get that information and create a financial aid offer for you based on all of those sources of aid that you might be eligible for. Before we go into talking about the offers, I think it's important to kind of make this distinction between direct cost and cost of attendance, because this is something that you're going to see a little bit different at every school that's sending you a financial aid offer. So direct costs is also synonymous with billed costs. This is costs that are going to go through the university. They're going to be owed to your student account for things like tuition, mandatory fees, room and board if you're living on campus. That's your direct cost. The cost of attendance is made up of those direct costs and also a series of estimates for things like books and supplies, transportation, personal expenses, miscellaneous expenses, things like that. So this cost of attendance represents your students' maximum budget that they can accept financial aid up to. So they can have grants and scholarships and accept loans up to this full cost of attendance that includes those estimates. So if you were to go out and get a Parent Plus loan, for instance, for max eligible, they're going to take the cost of attendance minus the other financial aid that your student is eligible for and give you that remaining eligibility on a Parent Plus loan. That means that you're going to have loan funds that exceed those direct costs that are actually owed to the university. So you're going to get a refund of those loan funds from the school, and then that money is in your pocket to be able to pay for books and supplies, for transportation expenses throughout the semester for your student, or to use for personal expenses or living expenses for your student while they're away at college. So these estimates that are listed in blue are not going to be the same for every student, what is actually paid, but you're going to be able to see this cost of attendance, and they're just kind of placeholders, just kind of estimates that show you typically based on, an average student, this is about what families are paying for things like books and supplies, transportation while their student is enrolled. I make this distinction because sometimes schools will put your federal aid, your state aid, your institutional aid against direct costs, and sometimes they'll put them against cost of attendance on these financial aid offers. So it's important to kind of have this in the back of your mind when you see that financial aid offer. Okay, this is going off of direct costs only, or this is going off of cost of attendance, or some will show you both. This is your remaining cost from direct costs or cost of attendance, so that you can kind of see, okay, this is what I actually owe the university, and this is my additional room that I have in my budget to be able to pay for things above and beyond my direct costs at the institution. Like I said, once those schools have that FAFSA, or really once you're admitted to the institution, they're going to kind of pull funding from all sources that you're eligible for and make up this financial aid offer. So it'll show you either direct costs or cost of attendance or both, and then all of the aid that you're eligible for from all of those sources. And then your remaining cost for the year. It is also important to kind of take note of what aid they're putting on there and what sources those are coming from. So if you'll remember the types of aid, the gift aid, that free aid of scholarships and grants versus the self-help aid of loan and employment opportunities. You'll just want to make sure that you're really discerning when you look through all of those aid types, and just kind of keep make sure that you're just aware of what those financial aid or what those funding sources are. So this is a scholarship, that means it's free aid. This is a grant, that means it's free aid. This is a loan, that means it has to be paid back. This is an employment opportunity, that means it has to, we have to actually work for that money. And every school is going to show you that a little bit differently. Some schools will kind of break out, here's your free aid versus here's your loans versus here's your employment opportunities, or some are going to lump it all together and show you that remaining cost. So it's important to kind of break it out in that way so that you can really be comparing apples to apples at those different institutions, and comparing that cost realistically between those different colleges.
And comparing those apples to apples can be quite challenging sometimes because of what you just said, that every college does it a little bit differently, right? And so there's better letters than others in terms of ease of understanding what's actually happening, right? So yeah, there are helpful resources as well to help you understand what you're looking at on a financial aid award letter, even specifically like people like Hannah can help you understand that, or there's lots of resources that we usually share with seniors to help them understand the financial aid award letters.
Absolutely, yeah. So as part of your financial aid offer, if you have filed a FAFSA, will be that federal student loan. So you would be eligible for that federal student loan just by filing the FAFSA. And eligibility is based off of your year by credits and your filing of the FAFSA. So freshmen typically are eligible for $5,500 in that federal direct student loan. And this is just to show you that, you know, students would be eligible for this just by filing the FAFSA, which can be a great kind of motivator to just file the FAFSA, see what you might be eligible for in terms of need-based aid, but then also kind of have this option out there in case, you know, something happens and you do decide you need to take out a loan to be able to help with that cost of attendance. This would be in the student's name, no cosigner or anything like that, and it's not credit-based. So this eligibility is just based on filing the FAFSA for that academic year. So like I said, most freshmen would get $5,500 in that federal direct loan. And based on their need at that institution, they could be eligible for a portion of that loan to be subsidized. So it can be broken out into subsidized and unsubsidized. That subsidized portion will not be accruing interest while the student is enrolled. The unsubsidized portion will be accruing interest, but repayment on both of those types of loans is deferred until 6 months after they graduate or they fall below a half-time status. So if they're ever enrolled in less than 6 hours, their grace period would start and then repayment would start after that. Eligibility for these loans go up a little bit based on credit hours. So for sophomores, you get $6,500, and then junior and senior year, you get $7,500 in these federal direct student loans. Also, to kind of put on your radar at this point in the year, outside scholarships can be a great way to kind of drive down that cost of attendance really anywhere you are attending. Different universities have different policies on these as well. So a question that you'll want to ask these different institutions that are kind of on your list is, are outside scholarships stackable on other financial aid, just to make sure that you are really kind of maximizing your eligibility. Sometimes schools will not allow outside scholarships to be stackable. And so really you're just kind of changing the funding source of your aid, but you're not adding to the net amount that you're getting at that institution. So it's important to ask those questions and ask questions about their process for notifying the school of outside scholarships and how those go on your financial aid offer. Mm-hmm. If you're looking to pay from a college savings plan, a 529 plan, most schools will accept payments directly from that 529 plan, but each plan works a little bit differently. So really as early as the junior year, you can start reaching out to those providers and asking about what the policy is for authorizing those funds to come out of the 529 and pay towards those qualified expenses at the institutions. If you have the Missouri Most plan for your students, they do have an electronic transfer option now to some institutions that will allow you to basically just wire the funds directly to the school. And as a good kind of general rule, it's better to send those funds directly to the institution via electronic wire or paper check, rather than sending those funds to yourself and then paying the institution directly. There can be some additional tax implications in Missouri for families that do let that money pass through their hands first. So just a good general rule to let that money go directly to the institution that you're paying, rather than trying to do that yourself.
And then one other point on outside scholarships is that those sometimes students and families consider those a lot or apply for those for freshman year, but there are scholarships out there that are winnable for the subsequent years as well. And so those aren't only something to be thinking about during senior year of high school, beyond throughout your college experience, it's wise to keep your eyes open to other scholarship opportunities as you go.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is kind of a starting list of some resources that can be available out there for private or outside scholarships. As a general rule for these, we always recommend going kind of as local as possible first and putting your time and energy into those scholarship applications that, maybe fewer students are applying to. When you go to the FAFSA or College Board, those are nationwide college searches that all college going students are looking at and applying for. And so there are thousands of students applying for those scholarships, whereas for a local Rotary Club or, your parents' employer or something like that, you could have a handful of students applying for those. So it's best to kind of start local and then work your way out to those kind of nationwide college searches. A lot of students, when they're looking at these outside or private scholarships, want to go for, the Bill Gates scholarship or the Coca-Cola scholarship that's going to pay for everything, tuition and room and board and everything. But even $500 or $1,000 can go a long way with these private scholarships. So don't count anything out just because it doesn't look like it's going to change your world. $1,000 can mean a lot when you're staring down a tuition payment.
Absolutely. And at CBC, a great way to keep an eye on those sorts of opportunities, especially the more local ones, is every Wednesday we send out the weekly mail from CBC Counseling. And on that, every single time we link to our digital virtual bulletin board where we list all scholarship opportunities that we become aware of through local solicitations from the scholarship entities. And we post them all on there with the deadlines in chronological order, and just really emphasizing what Hannah said. Sometimes it's those local ones, the smaller ones, the Sunset Hills Chamber of Commerce sort of things that are really more winnable, first of all, because there's only a certain, a few dozen applicants sometimes for those things versus, 100,000 applicants for the Taco Bell, Coca-Cola one. So really keep an eye on that weekly email too, and click on that bulletin board. And we also link to a few of these that Hannah has on the PowerPoint here as well that our students and families have benefited from in the past.
Yeah. Okay, so timeline for senior year. So for juniors that are kind of anticipating this process next year, and for seniors who are going through the thick of it right now, just to kind of give you a broad overview of what happens when. So like I said at the very beginning, you can kind of be anticipating things that are happening and stay up to date on deadlines and things like that. So really, August to December, your fall of your senior year, you're going to be thick in the kind of admission heavy things, filling out your admission applications, really honing your list of places that you're wanting to apply, figuring out, it's a lot of kind of planning and anticipating of getting a list of all of your priority deadlines down for all of your schools. So to the majority of your schools, are you wanting to apply by November 1st? And then do they have a December 1st scholarship deadline or a February 1st FAFSA deadline? Things like that. So you can kind of map out your year and make sure that you are staying on top of all of those deadlines. It can get really overwhelming, even if you're looking at just 3 institutions, looking at all of those deadlines that are coming up in that year. But certainly if you have a lot more schools on your list, you're going to want to have a place where you kind of consolidate all of that information and have it all, a spreadsheet or a notebook or something like that, or even just putting those dates on your calendar where you're anticipating those dates and can stay on top of things. October 1st is when that free application for federal student aid is going to be open. So you can create your FSA IDs anytime before that date, and then beginning October 1st, making sure that you submit your FAFSA. It can feel really good to just kind of get it off your plate. And so don't wait to do it because you think it's going to be scary or you think it's going to take a lot of time. Just get in there and start it, and you'll see that it's really not that intimidating. And you know, you're going to be able to fly through it, especially with the direct data exchange and porting that information over from the IRS. It's going to be, I'm not going to say it's going to be a super enjoyable process, but it will be simple.
And we'll host another FAFSA completion night here at CBC in the fall. Hannah was one of a few financial services reps from local universities who come over and help us out with that. So even when it does get a little tricky, I know that night we had a few families that were kind of struggling their way through or were hitting some glitch in the process, and we were able to, Hannah and her colleagues were able to usher the families through those issues. So keep an eye open for FAFSA completion night here at CBC as well.
Yeah. So after you file that FAFSA, November typically is pretty early to start receiving those financial aid offers. Really, more often you're going to see them kind of January, February, March time period of that senior year. And that's what's going to show you, like I said, that direct cost or cost of attendance minus all of that financial aid that they've been offered, and kind of gives you that bottom line. And that really, I think, is the first time that families really kind of sit down and can digest that information in a way that makes a little bit more sense. It's not as theoretical, it's a little bit more concrete. And you can really start kind of formulating those conversations as a family around, okay, what's the expectation for financing? How are we going to make this work? What's financially feasible for our family? And moving forward in that college search in a really big way. I think those financial aid offers typically for the majority of families are really what they're waiting on to be able to make those final decisions. So after those financial aid offers come through, of course, visiting campus, making those final decisions. A lot of schools are going to be pushing towards that May 1st college decision day to submit deposits, accept any financial aid. And then really, once you've made that decision, that's kind of crunch time of putting the things in place that you talked about as a family. So if, a Parent Plus loan was part of your financing plan, applying for that Parent Plus loan or applying for private or alternative loans. If your student is wanting to take out that federal student loan, completing the master promissory note, doing loan entrance counseling, kind of getting those things in place and really buttoning up plans for paying for that first year. Typically, schools are going to send the first bill around July or August. And that can be the first kind of, okay, this is, we're working on estimates before then, and this is really what our build costs are, and kind of making sure that those things are in place to be able to pay off that bill. And your student probably will also be attending summer orientations or fall welcome weeks to finalize registering for classes and getting their housing all situated and making sure that they're ready for the first day of classes there in August. So lots of things to kind of anticipate and complete and talk through as a family during your college search. But please use your resources that are available to you. I mean, you have a great counseling staff at CBC, and then us on the college side are always willing to help families, regardless of if you're interested in SLU or not. I am happy to be a resource for kind of all things financial aid. If you feel like you're having trouble with the FAFSA or you don't know, how to dissect a financial aid offer from another school, I'm more than happy to help with those kinds of questions. So I'm going to put my contact information up here on the screen so that you have it. And feel free to go to your counseling staff at CBC and ask for my direct information as well. Like I said, happy to help at any point in the process.
That's awesome. That's quite an offer, and we really appreciate that, and we've used it many times over the years with our families. So we really appreciate you, Hannah, and thank you so much for doing this for us today. It's just great information for us, and we really appreciate our partnership with you, and have a lot to digest here, and certainly appreciate your time and going over it with us very much. Thank you.
Happy to help.
All right. Take care, Hannah.
See ya.